This week on the show, we are very excited to be joined by Dan Kennedy. Dan is a celebrity and portrait photographer. He's shot for numerous magazines and titles that everyone would have heard of, from the Sunday Times through to the Hollywood Reporter. He talks to us today about his systems that he's put in place and how he runs his business and how he stays motivated. So sit back and enjoy.
All right, Greg.
Hey, Snotty, how you doing?
Oh, mate, I'm honestly so bunged up. I've got to apologise. A, to you, B, to Dan, our guest, and C, to you, wonderful audience. I have, for some reason, yesterday feeling absolutely fine, but today have woken up with the cold of the century, just as we needed to record the next episode. So that's gone really well. So if I do drop out,
it's because
I need to
sniffing loudly. I mean, I think we're finally entering kind of cold weather winter time.
Oh yeah. Winter feels like it's going to be coming pretty soon.
Winter is coming, Tom.
It is,
and you are a photographer of the summer months.
I do. I
don't know Game of Thrones well enough to paraphrase that.
I was going to say, have you seen the show? Not many photographers in it.
No, but yeah. It would have been better if there were. No, so this week we have Dan on the show, don't we?
We do,
and it's quite a long episode. Long episode. It's about an hour,
as usual.
He's just got a lot of good stuff to chat about, really.
What a nice chap, eh?
Really nice guy, and there's some great kind of nuggets in here. Sorry, that was an episode callback.
I was impressed. I was impressed. If you know, you know. Yep, absolutely. The OG ex-Neg crew.
There were some really good nuggets in there of kind of his approach to shoots and some of the systems he's put in place. And yeah, just really, I found it really helpful, actually. I took loads of notes. As ever, the show notes will be up, so check them out. And any other news? We're moving over to Acast, aren't we? Should we say that?
No, we have moved. We are now with a new service provider for the podcast, and I don't think it'll make any difference to the listeners, but hopefully it will. Who knows?
I have no idea what it means.
No, you just told me to do it, so I did it. It's the old jump off a cliff conundrum. But yeah, no, so we're basically trying to ramp these up and become a bit more regular with them. Things now, hopefully, are going to be a bit... We're just trying to balance it a bit more, because actually we love doing this show, as we've talked about before, but it's just trying to find the time. But we're making a concerted effort.
I have to apologise, because we had two absolute blinders scheduled for this week, and I've had to cancel them because I've suddenly got to go away. But they will be back. They are with two... really, really talented, but quite different photographers.
Yep.
And we'll record them soon, and they'll be up. So we've got them, and we've got a couple scheduled already for the new year. So actually, we've got about 8 episodes that we're going to be bringing out with straight off the bat. So
8 excellent episodes.
Indeed. So you've got loads of stuff to look forward to. But this one is a blinder, so give it a listen. And if you want to see any of the information that Dan mentions, any of the names, etc., there'll be links in the show notes. And if you could hear that silence, that was because Tom threatened to sneeze and didn't, and now he's coughing, and now he's back.
Sorry, but due to the magic of podcasts, you guys would never know. Well, listen, without further ado, listen to the wonderful Dan Kennedy.
This week on the show, we are very lucky to be joined by British photographer Dan Kennedy. Dan Kennedy is best known really as a celebrity photographer that's shot for both the Saturday and Sunday Times and magazines such as the Hollywood Reporter, quite often gracing their covers, in fact. He's been shooting in the UK for well over... How many years, Dan, is it you've been working, would you say?
20, maybe? About 20.
Yeah, okay. And you started in kind of... the humble newspaper room, didn't you? From what I understand, is that your kind of background? Talk us a little bit through your journey into photography.
I did, yeah. I got a job as a runner when I was 18 at the local newspaper in Norfolk, which is where I'm from. So I was kind of running faxes. Not want to show my age, but they were I was running faxes around the newsroom, and I was super interested in photography, and I used to sort of linger past the dark room where there was like a hive of activity, and I managed to just sort of sweet talk the people in the dark room, and eventually also sweet talk the woman that ran the the live music page. So I blagged a pass for the local live music venue, and I gave the shots that I took to the paper for free in return for film. So it was quite a good kind of quid pro quo. I mean, I barely knew what I was doing, but it was that was my kind of, that was sort of my intro into photography, really. I did that for probably about 6 months, and then I went to London and did a photography course, and then the Eastern Daily Press, the newspaper, phoned me in the last sort of tranche of that course and said, hey, we've got a staff job that's come up, do you want it? And so I sort of dropped everything in London, picked it back to Norfolk, and kind of couldn't believe my luck. I got given, a staff camera bag full of, my hand-picked selection of kit, and I got a company car, and, I went to Sainsbury's and was able to buy whatever I wanted. It's like kind of heaven to a certain extent,
Yeah, because I mean, obviously it's almost like an apprenticeship doing it that way, and it's a tough way to learn kind of on the job, because you make mistakes, and everyone does when they're starting off doing that kind of work, but you also probably learn better from having made those mistakes yourself, right?
Absolutely, I think really well put. That's exactly it. I think you're thrown right into it. I was shooting around 5 jobs a day, shooting on a couple of old Nikon FM2s, shooting on HP5 film, and processing that film myself in the local regional darkroom in Great Yarmouth, and then I'd make a print of the selected shot, and then I would photocopy the print, and then I would fax the photocopy of the print to the head office, and if they liked it, they'd send a motorbike courier to come and pick up the negatives. So there was kind of it was thinking back, that was kind of it's pretty technical stuff. You used to be kind of really multitasking, I guess. But in terms of learning as you go, when you're shooting that much from a local football game at 2:00, and then in the morning you're doing Susan and Peter's diamond wedding anniversary or whatever, you're using a whole range of skill sets there, so I think it's like an expedited kind of learning curve. And as you say, you've got room to sort of muck up, fire at the local hotel, and you're like, shit, I didn't put any film in my camera, you'll never do that again. I actually didn't do that at a fire at the local hotel, but I did do it at an athletics an athletics event, and I was using 2 cameras, and I just got back to the darkroom, and that fateful kind of loose feeling on the winding wheel on the top left, and I never did it again. I never made that fuck up.
Did you did you have film in one of the cameras, or was it no film?
I did, yes.
Oh, okay.
There was a few tears, but everything was sort of 24 mil. But
yeah. Well, there's a lesson straight there. Always have 2 camera bodies.
Yeah,
I guess a modern equivalent is turning up without a you're just getting ready to shoot and you turn on the camera and you haven't got a card in the camera, or the classic, some camera settings, if you don't turn it off, you can end up actually shooting frames without a card in the camera, which for me is one of those things where it's one of the first settings always change in the menu, is like, cannot shoot without the card. Because then at least that you're not going to accidentally shoot off 5 frames and realize later that there's no card in the camera.
You know what?
Right.
You know what, though? Obviously, so many things have changed. Now, do you even use a media? I mean, obviously, I know you probably use SSDs, but I assume you just tether everything.
Yeah, I still shoot to cards sometimes. I was on a shoot with a celebrity that shall remain nameless recently, who was so difficult to photograph that I just yanked the cable out of the camera and said, come over to the window with me, and sort of,
push them out.
Push them out. There you go. Now that would have been genius. Actually, it would have solved all my problems. Put the shutter on to fast and just blast the hell out of the situation. I do actually. I do shoot to cards sometimes, and I'm sure the same with you guys. Sometimes the setup of dual monitors and tether cables and this kind of thing can cause a few problems. So sometimes, it's better to maybe get rid of a few people, unplug the tether cable and, do a bit of we come in peace. It's all lo-fi around here, that can sometimes save the moment,
I think with newspaper photography specifically as a vocational training as well, as you said, it does mean that you end up covering all sorts of events and all sorts of situations. Have you found that that's been kind of, I mean, I know a couple of portrait photographers with newspaper backgrounds, and they are very good at their job because they quite often are used to problem solving very quickly, and also working in situations which aren't necessarily fully under their control. I guess that comes from kind of going to some, as you said, photographing Dennis and Marjorie's wedding anniversary, and you turn up and they're in a windowless room, or they're it's at night in the winter and you haven't got your lights or whatever. Like, do you find that has helped? That kind of problem solving. Did you feel like you were kind of hit with a lot of scenarios in your younger days, and that's kind of helped out now? Or?
100%, yeah, absolutely, and you're really right. It's developing this broad skill set, which means that you're sort of ready to be reactive. And I kind of pretty much know that within the kind of Rolodex of people that a photo director might choose, I know that when they're thumbing through the list, they're like, oh, I've got Bob, I've got Dave, I've got Pete, or there's Dan Kennedy. I know that I might get picked for either how I am with the talent or the speed at which I might get something. They might be like, oh, we'll put Kennedy on it because we'll know he will get something, and that absolutely comes from that newspaper kind of cutting your teeth, where things move very, very quickly. And so it's a cross between a sort of a charm offensive and a really fast way of working, So we always travel with a piece of black velvet, and sometimes literally as said talent is on their way out the door, my assistant I'll give the nod and they'll just quickly hold the piece of black velvet, behind us. Just get one more really quick shot. Just stay there for 2 seconds, really in close, tight portrait black velvet. That's one extra shot that, they might even still be moving slightly, at that point. But, we're always prepped. We're not in every situation, but,
That's a great little kind of bag of tricks thing. Yeah. Sometimes though, it can be a bit frustrating when I've got certain picture editors that send me on assignments that they turn around and say, yeah, well we went to you because it was a bit of a tricky one. And it's like, oh, it's nice that that you can trust me with it, but at the same time, you only seem to give me the tricky ones.
Yeah. So, well, yeah, there is that. Yeah, absolutely. No, without a doubt, definitely.
There was a magazine that used to send me on, I won't say which title, and I won't see because people will be able to find out who the picture editor was, but I used to get sent, we've not met in person, but I'm quite a big guy, and so I would get sent to the people they knew were going to be difficult. Like, I kind of went through a spate of my career of photographing murderers, fighters, like proper, like tough guys. And they'd be like, no, we'll send you because I don't reckon they'll give you any shit. And I was just like, oh, wicked, great, thanks, guys. I'm a bit of a lover, not a fighter, so I kind of walk into these guys' rooms, and there was a guy I photographed in Birmingham who had a parrot who he'd trained to alert him when the police had turned up. Again, no names. But I accidentally stood up and kicked this parrot across the floor. Long story, but he basically was just like, oh, it's a good job, you're so big. And I was like, yeah, damn right it is. I just kick your parrot. So, yeah. Oh, my
God, amazing.
Parrot was fine, by the way. So,
please don't write in. So, in terms of kind of your background then and that kind of early start in newspapers, what do you think if you were to kind of draw some lessons out that you kind of you learnt from that? Is there anything in there that you kind of, well, not even from there, but in the last few years as well, is there anything that you've learnt in your career that you kind of wish you'd known a bit sooner?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of stuff, I think I didn't assist, so I sort of came through in a sort of a bit of an awkward way, really. I worked on the local paper and as I said, they positioned me in Great Yarmouth, which is not one of the most desirable seaside locations in the UK. It wasn't to me anyway. I'm sure it is to some people. And I wanted to go to the head office, and they said to me, the boss said, "Oh, that's dead man's shoes," i.e., there's no chance of you getting in there. So I quit and I went to work at a news agency in Nottingham, and I learned a lot more very quickly there. It had gone from being kind of fire at the local hotel in Norfolk through to sort of light aircraft crash over Lincolnshire, and suddenly we were into longer lenses and being a lot more kind of competitive with the local news agency. So and there was a lot less scope to sort of muck up. We were the agency that the national newspapers would ring in the Midlands, so it could be portrait of a GP for the Guardian in the morning, and then something like the light aircraft crash in the afternoon. So skill sets really broadening, and forget not putting film in your camera. At an athletics event, those times are gone. There was just no leeway to muck up. So I did that for about a year and a half, and then I just realized I didn't want to be doing that, and I wanted to be in London, and I got really discouraged from going to London. I rung several picture editors, and they were like, "Oh, it's all locked up here, mate. No, there's no openings here. Go take yourself off to some region and start off there." And I thought, no, I don't really want to do that. So I ignored them. I took out a £15,000 loan and bought the first Nikon digital camera, and I actually took out a car. I bought a car on finance on the same day. So those two finance agreements didn't see each other. And I sort of took a deep breath and turned up in London with no guarantee of work. And I guess I was like 25. I don't think I'd take that kind of risk now. I sort of, I was like, Kennedy here reporting for duty, and basically, so it was kind of like quite a full-on kind of time. But I think I learned loads of stuff along the way, really. How saying no to stuff is something that more recently, I've been realizing that is a really important thing. So you don't have to say yes to everything, and I think that's really helped in the last 5-10 years, basically in terms of just saying no to stuff. You don't have to be like, oh, hang on one second, what really shit job in Newcastle, God, I spent years going, right, okay, let's mobilize, let's get to Newcastle. How do we get to Newcastle? You don't necessarily need to do that. Maybe you do, but there'll come times where you don't necessarily have to stick your hand up and do that. Another thing is outsourcing stuff, not doing everything yourself. I've become a lot better at that. I think we're all jack of all trades, kind of master of none to a certain extent in those early few years. And I get it. You have to be, I mentor a few photographers now, and most of them, when they kind of arrive with me, they've got their laptop on their knees at midnight and they're editing, and they've promised 80 shots retouched to the client, and that's wrong on a lot of levels, really. It's, they've gone out and done the job, negotiated the fee, over offered to kind of try and clinch the deal, and then what are they, head retoucher as well as chief, head of new business, chief photographer, etc. So so I think it's important, once you have a bit of budget, to be able to work out the things that you're not great at. For me, for example, bookkeeping was one of the first things. I was like, maths is not my strong suit. I didn't love maths. It used to be literally bottom of the pile, actually sending out the invoices to try and get some money in, which is super important, and actually that was way down there on the bottom of the to-do list. So as soon as I had enough cash, I got someone in to do that. And the same thing happens now with retouching. I don't do any of my own retouching. I'm not a retoucher. There's people that are much better at that. And I get some of my retouching done in the Far East, and that happens while I'm asleep. And also that's a profit line for us. I'm making some markup on that retouching. So that enables me to use some other people to help me in this kind of quest and this vocation, this career that I have, because I don't want to be doing everything myself, and I shouldn't be, really,
From a retouch point of view, how do you choose to do it? Do you kind of do a grade in capture and then send it out with the grade already applied to then go and have all the skin work and everything done on it? Or do you kind of have it done, do you send them the raw with a guide grade, or how do you choose to do it?
Yeah, I do exactly the first way that you said. I I do the grade as we go along. So most of the time I'm tethered, so my camera's joined to my computer, and 3/4 of the time I'm in a studio environment. So I'll have a bigger monitor with me there, and then I'll dial in the color grade using Capture One, which I'm sure you guys use and a lot of your listeners use as well. Which has its problems and limitations, but yeah, I dial my grade in there, and then that's what the client sees. If I feel like it blue in the shadows and a bit yellow in the highlights and really crunchy, then I want them to see that. That's an extension of my artistic kind of creativity with regard to how I saw the shoot, I think. So so I lock that in and send that off, quite right, exactly as you say, as an EIP. I send that off to the retoucher and then just give notes for anything else that might need to be done. So yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice.
Do you find yourself using the annotations much in Capture One on a completely geeky side note?
Do you know, I actually used it last week, drew all over. I'd sort of do a really bad kiddie scroll of where a masthead would be, much to the client's surprise. But I was also sort of blocking in where other hero lines of text could be, on a mock cover. But yeah, not enough is the answer. But yeah, it's cool, isn't it? Yeah, I should use it more. Yeah. We do use overlays. Often we get a PDF overlay of the masthead on a clear layer, and then have that overlaid so we can sort of check from a format point of view that we're leaving enough space and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's a super useful feature. Although I've always found it a little bit fiddly, like the way that you move the left a bit, left a bit, right a bit,
scale down, left a bit, right.
It's it's a bit basic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is a bit basic. Yeah.
Capture One, if it's listening, sort it out.
Capture One,
exactly.
Capture One don't really care. This is what I've learned is that all these these companies, they seem to be, and this is a bit of a side note, they seem very much trying to get as many people away from Lightroom currently, rather than dealing with kind of like the high end pro requests. So yeah, that's just the frustration that I've got. But a load of the stuff's kind of outdated, like their watermark feature. Yeah. Again, and for some reason they hobbled it by taking the preview out. So now you have to export a file to check that it's right. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. What about the? Can we just discuss how the new tools look? Although I'm not. I mean,
aren't they awful?
What's going on with these sort of slightly comical, I'm screaming at Capture One. Where's my? I have a little thing called Q. I don't know if you have that. I've set everything up on Q. I know where everything is, and now Q's gone all a bit funny, and everything else is. I don't know.
It's because they're trying to tie it in with the iPad and all that kind of malarkey. Kind of. At no point have I ever gone. Oh, do you know what I need from Capture One? An iPad app. I've never thought that. I've never gone. Do you know what? I love my 30-inch Apple XDR, but do you know what I really want to edit on? An iPad. I've never had that feeling. So I'm sure there are some people who think editing on an iPad's a great idea, but I'm yet to meet one.
Me too.
So is there anything else then that you've lessons that you've kind of
yeah, absolutely. So it's okay to say no to stuff. Super important.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes when it can be very liberating when you turn some stuff down. Look, if you're kind of, if you're grafting right now and you're listening to this and you're thinking, bloody hell, Dan, great. I'm in no position to be able to turn anything down. Maybe you're not right now, but it's important to have that as a seed in the back of your mind, I think. I got to the age of 35 and I had a load of blood tests done for one thing or another, and my adrenal glands were sort of burnt out. And adrenal glands, they pump out cortisol to get you up in the morning and melatonin to put you to sleep at night. And I just burnt them out, and that was from being like, yeah, great, hang on 1 second, yeah, great, Namibia, yeah, I'd love to, guys, we're flying at midnight, woo, rock and roll. I loved it all. It's amazing, get 4 octaves up, 4 heads, 4 packs, just like the whole kind of theatre and the accelerated element of it all. And it wasn't actually good for me, really. I had a lot of years doing that and loving it. And I didn't think anything was wrong until I realised that, these adrenal glands were burnt. I had to have an adrenal supplement from an organic cow in New Zealand. If you
wow, that's a proper
3 months of that, and my adrenal glands were built back up to normal. So yeah, so that was just a sort of a little note from the dock to say, hey, listen, you don't have to kind of say yes to everything. So I think, saying no to some things is really important. And realizing that you can't do everything successfully really within the business. A lot of business leaders say that, if you're starting a business doing anything, if you're the CEO at the top, there should really be 3 roles beneath you: sales, tech, and admin. And, photographers never think about things like this. So if you're CEO of your business, then who's doing the sales? That's you going out and driving new business. Who's doing the tech, checking that your capture one's up to date and wondering why you can't tether? And who's doing your admin, sitting there with your laptop on your knees at midnight, sending off some invoices? You're likely doing it all. So it's, if we started a business selling, I don't know, phone cases for you, Dan, Tom, Greg's Phone Case Emporium, to make that successful, we might really ultimately need someone in sales who's going to sell these things, someone in tech, let's get the website looking sweet as, and we want all the right followers and stuff. And then who's doing our admin, sending out the orders, all of this stuff. So, so I think it took me a while to kind of come round to this. But I've done quite a lot of work, on my own business and realizing that outsourcing things can really make a difference,
When you first started outsourcing and then obviously having to budget and charge that back to the client, how did you kind of approach that with maybe some of your regular clients? And you kind of go, oh, guys, actually, I'm not going to do the retouch anymore. This is how much it's going to cost. And sometimes they might just go, oh, shit, really? Is it, how do we, was there like a way you kind of dealt with that? Or did you just be like, if you can't pay for a retouch, you're out?
Yeah, I think I bit the bullet, and I think I'd realized quite early on I wasn't offering 80 shots in the edit with a little cleanup on each into the bargain. I think I realized early on that was too much of a sell. So I just sort of slowly did it really, and just sort of I just said what we say now is, we outsource retouching, a cost of £150 an image, and then sometimes people will try and do a deal, and we might do a deal if it's if we can claw some of the cost back another way, so I didn't sort of make a blanket big announcement. I just sort of stated that that's the fact. There's some other things we do now. We work a standard 8-hour shoot day. Me and the crew need to be fed, and these are things that one of my producers will make sure they get across to the client way ahead of the shoot, particularly if it's a client we haven't worked with before. We do this all with a very sweet smile, but this is after years of being on a 10-hour shoot day with a pot noodle on a hillside or something. And it's, I've made strides to sort of,
but pot noodle on a hillside, are you having cold pot noodles, or are you actually bringing a kettle out? Because if you're bringing a kettle out, you're bringing a generator. I'm impressed with the level of kit you bring out just to get the pot noodle done.
I've got I've got a really comfy sort of soft sheepskin camping stool, and then my the thermos pot noodle holder, with a beautiful vista. I mean,
well, what could be better? You're listening to The Exposed Negative, sponsored by Pot Noodle. I wish.
I wouldn't mind that.
I was going to say.
You send me some, please.
What do you okay, so when in terms of kind of running your business and stuff, you've bought in these systems and what have you that you're talking about. Is there anything kind of hard and fast? Because those are nice examples that you've said, but myself and Tom have talked on the show before about trying to get certain systems in place to help things run a bit smoother and just to stay organized, because I find that that's one area where photographers really fall down a lot of the time. Obviously everyone has different strengths, but it can be hard to stay on top of things. It can be hard to store information in an easily findable way. I guess it doesn't necessarily always meld well with the kind of creative brain. So if that's a fair thing to say, I don't know. Do you have anything that you use basically that you found that really helps with your kind of day-to-day running of the business?
Yeah, I think you hit on a really important point there, and I think most creatives are like just a cluster of crazy habits that kind of is a this moving kind of ball of disorganization. And the flip side of that is that we hopefully have all this wonderful creativity that we kind of come up with, and so we need to kind of hone it in. And I often say to people who, particularly the guys I work with on the mentoring scheme, we've kind of got a devil on our left shoulder and a saint on our right, and the devil is often shouting a lot louder than the saint, and the brain is, the mind is cheeky, and it will just default you to the most passive procrastinating tasks you can potentially do, so it's kind of sort of human nature. So it takes a lot. I think it takes a lot to sort of get a hold of yourself. And I think I had 6 or 7 years ago, had a sort of a defined time really, where I was like, oh my God, I'm kind of just, I'm drowning in a sea of nothingness. I said, the side output happens to be a load of creative work that I'm getting some nice comments about, but everything else just seems to be this sort of cloudy sort of clusterfuck of a life. It wasn't that bad, but I actually work with like a business mentor myself, actually, a brilliant guy who basically just sort of kind of kicked me up the arse a bit, and also made me look at like my time, how I'm running the first 1 hour of my day, which is sort of super crucial on a non-shoot day. I think this is hard as well, because all of us, may just suddenly get a job in 48 hours that's going to mean you're going to need to drop everything, so having to go from having routines to having no routines is obviously quite a big thing. But yeah, I have a virtual PA now who runs a lot of the sort of just the sort of admin side of things, and then I have a producer who deals with the client side of things. So when we have a new business query, the producer will respond to that new business query, and then we sort of enter a pre-production phase, and then the shoot happens, and then the sort of the post-production. So I've got a bit of assistance with that, and so I guess the organization element is, I'm up at 7 every day, and if I'm not on a shoot day, then I'm kind of making sure I move my body a bit, do a bit of exercise, and then not tackle too much. We've all got 80 things on our to-do list, and you're likely just going to hop around that like mad, and choose some of the nice magpie shiny objects, not necessarily the things you want to be doing. So I do like a past year review in the first couple of days of January each year, where I look at what happened. And so I look at the calendar, and I look at positive kind of peaks. So I just make a list of anything that I think, oh, that was really cool. That shoot was amazing, and it earned me hardly any money, but the people were lovely. So that goes down in the positive column, sorry. And then, and I keep going down, and then I look through the calendar and do the same with negatives. Like, God, well, that in my mind was great, but actually it was shit. It was in Taunton. It pissed it down, and that client was actually a bit of a dick. So that's in the negative. And then what I do is look at the top sort of 20% of the positive as negatives, and I try and schedule more of the positives. And in the positives might be, went to an amazing gig at the O2. Great. Well, let's schedule some more gigs in. And some of the negatives might be like, shit job in Taunton, so let's make sure we don't do any jobs in Taunton. That was a real hassle getting down there. They were really pernickety. The art director, actually, now that I'm having this time out to stop and look at it, the art director was a nightmare. So no, it's a no from now on. And so I've said a lot of those no's, and I've also scheduled in a lot of things. I take my lovely wife Tony, we go somewhere quite nice for dinner like once a month now, and that comes, it's really nice because we probably go to 12 really cool restaurants in a year, and that comes as a result of actually sort of taking some time out and thinking, okay, well, let's schedule some more of the good things. So there's a good framework for the year, and then breaking that down into sort of day by day. Yeah, I'm very aware of what I'm doing in the first hour, and then straight after that, if I'm not on a shoot day, I'll be working on what I know to be kind of the most important thing for that day, really. Maybe that's a bit of creative research on a shoot that's coming up on Friday. And so I'll have a good clear 1 hour, phone off, door closed, no distractions, and I'll just go down that rabbit hole. What do I really want to get on Friday? What am I using here? Am I going to use Aries and constant light? Hang on a minute, I made a great reference of the Profoto focus spot. Let's find that. Right, let's go down a Profoto focus spot rabbit hole and let's screen grab the hell out of that. And after an hour, I've got some great ideas about why reminding myself why I wanted to use the Profoto focus spot and what great things I might be able to do. Maybe I saw some leaves in a little autumn pool and the colors of the leaves in the water were pretty cool. So maybe I'll bring in the element of that leaf color. Maybe that's my background color, and I'll have a background painted in the color of those kind of autumn leaves. Maybe I'll send the iPhone snap of the autumn leaves that I saw on a walk to the set designer, and they'll paint the background that color, and then I'll bring in the focus spot. And that's how that happened. If I'm kind of sort of like, munching on my Pret sandwich while chatting to my mate, while kind of trying to think about what I might do on Friday, it's not going to be good enough. We've got to be better than that. We're living in this world with so many distractions now. We're all addicted, to our smartphones and things. So I think it needs that. So I'm quite regimented with my non-shoot time. As I said, if the phone goes and suddenly, we've got an A-lister in town on Thursday and we need to scramble, then great. I'll actually be doing some of the similar things then, going into my reference folder, looking at creative references and location references and dreaming up the best ideas that I can come up with. So I'll still be doing that. But I think it's really, I say to people, that I've been working with on the mentoring scheme, do you wake up on a Tuesday, you're standing in your pants looking out the window and it's drizzling, you're holding a coffee. What do you do? What do you do? Oh, it's new business day today. I'm going to go through that email list of people. Actually, do you know what? I haven't seen Bob for ages. I'm going to call Bob and we're going to go, do you know, actually, I've realized as I'm thinking that thought, I don't feel that great. I think I'm actually going to have a nap, and then I'll wake up and then I'll sort of see how I feel. I mean, what do you do? What do you actually do? We are solopreneurs. No one's taught us how to run these businesses that we run. So we need to really get hold of it and railroad our time a bit, really. And I think that even though that maybe sounds a bit anal in some ways, I think the net result of that, certainly for me, is that I'm getting to the end of weeks thinking, okay, God, I've achieved quite a lot. I'm just looking through these ARRI shots, these Profoto focus spot shots, and I'm really pleased I used that. I was a little bit unsure about it, and I'm so pleased I went for the brown autumn leaf color and actually chucked a bucket of water over him at the end, and he's sodden wet. And that's a bit like what that picture of those leaves looked like anyway. Yeah, I had a good week. Oh, and we went out for a cracking dinner as well. Right, let's hit the next week. And that's, I think, that's sort of how I roll now, but it wasn't always like that.
I was going to say that's quite a high level of self-control, because I think for me, I'm like, oh, I'll do this, and then I'm like, oh, actually, that looks kind of interesting, and go off and exactly do what you've just said. But is there actually? It's quite funny. I've started reading. Do you know Jocko Willink?
I do.
So, have you read his books?
I haven't, but I've listened to a lot of his podcasts. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So he is kind of like the ultimate guy of self-control.
Picture of a watch with some sweat drops at 4:30 in the morning.
but I get distracted when reading his book, which is kind of like the most ironic thing. And then I'm like, oh, I'll go and have a sandwich, and they go, no, Jocko wouldn't want me to have a sandwich. So I'm trying to get better at it. But yeah, so if anyone does need it, I can't remember what the book's called, but we'll put it in the show notes.
Be more Jocko.
Be more. Yeah, it's not far off. Yeah, I think it's something like only you can do it or something.
Okay.
I think, I hear you, but I think, people have to get a hold of themselves a bit, really. You've got to, you're at the top of your game, you guys. And so staying that razor sharp and, having that time to, to really work on creative ideas, think how good is the next best thing going to be? I don't know, mate. I guess maybe for me, it's a worry that I might just slip into, the meh of a kind of sort of a vanilla working life. And I don't think I can afford to do that. There's too many people snapping at my heels. There's, we're in this constant evolving, moving kind of vehicle ball of activity, and I think, to stay sharp and on it, I think it takes that. And I think for me, at the end of, a bit more of a disciplined week, I think I'm like, woohoo, let's get the beers in. I've had a great week, because I feel I've had so many weeks where I am standing in my pants looking out the window thinking, let's call Bob and go for a coffee. Oh, actually, hang on, I'm sure someone asked me. Oh yeah, it was the CEO of of a very large company asked me to do a portrait. I knew I should have got back to them. Oh, well, you know.
So specifically speaking, then I guess one thing is how you not only, I guess, communicate this, because you're running a small company effectively with as you said, employees, because you've got your producer and you've got kind of retouchers that you work with and what have you. What do you use? Is there any kind of software that you've bought in to use that helps you kind of keep on top of stuff? Is there anything that you have found works for you in terms of communicating with people or keeping calendars or a CRM to keep your database? Is there any systems that you've brought into place that you found have been really helpful?
Yeah, I mean, we use quite a few different systems. I suppose we use one called Asana to communicate. Do either of you guys heard of Asana?
I've heard of it, but you don't use it because I tend to be
so we have like you'd stick a job in. So the way we use it is we put the client and then who the talent is and then the date as an entry, and then any chat about that job and any attachments go into that kind of. It's almost like each list line has a bin almost, and then and then you can name people. And so my PA and my my producer are both. I can just tick whoever's kind of head of that task, and then everything to do with that job is in that bin. So let's say there's a mood board from the client, and then there's some chat about costs, and so everything is in there, and so yeah, that's super helpful. And at the end of the day, I can click on an inbox kind of icon there, and I can see exactly what's happened, because communication then gets a bit tricky. You've got to be on that as well. I used to suffer with my first producer from what I called open loops. So I'd be sort of sitting there driving home thinking, "Fuck, did you go back to Shirley? Oh my God, that's super important." And then I'd pick up the phone. "God, did you go back to Shirley?" Yeah, I went back to Shirley. I CC'd you in. "Oh God, sorry, I've only just finished the shoot. I didn't get a chance to look." And then. Right. So it was I went through a whole iteration of being like that. Whereas now with Asana, you can just click on the inbox and I can see, did this quote go out? Yes, it did. What happened with regard to this job? Dates been pushed forward a week. These two assistants and your Digitech is confirmed for the job on Friday. Great. I can just read through that list, and then we don't need to have any more chats about it. I just need the top line, and those loops are kind of closed, So yeah.
That makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think sometimes I'm super busy. We've just had a couple of key art jobs in 2 weeks, and there's a lot of moving parts in those, and there's a lot of things to a lot of organisation to be done, and some outside help as well. So there's been loads of communication for a small amount of photography in some ways, but then now we're going through a little quieter period, so it's not like I'm always kind of crazy busy, but these things make a sort of a really big difference. So yeah, definitely. And then retouching wise, we just use Dropbox, and my archive from the retoucher lives in Dropbox, and so then if people are asking for sort of like archive shots from the last year or two, then we can just send links out rather than me going, "Shit, I'm sure we had did I shoot Keanu Reeves? I can't remember." And if I did, where the hell open spotlight search Keanu _ Reeves, Keanu 123, cool Keanu. It must be in there
cool Keanu.
A few years of doing that. Does anyone else sympathize with me?
I'm sure they do. No, I'm like militant about my file naming, so I kind of know. But when in the Dropbox, that's obviously different from the archive. So we have everything obviously kind of probably backed up multiple times over. But how do you then? You obviously have the finished files and the retoucher on the Dropbox, so you can share the links. But I assume you also bring them over, so they're backed up on the hard drives and the servers, or however you have it set up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not overly complex in that respect. My really good mate of mine who lives in LA sort of goes down the. I shouldn't laugh, but I end up laughing at sort of all his the complexity of his backup strategies. For about 10 years it was Drobo this and Drobo that, and then he's gone through what's this other one, Synology, and then he's gone through the mother of all Synology setups at tens of thousands of dollars, and then
God, I don't know anyone like that.
Yeah, who would do that? Oh my God, what a nerd.
How funny. So no,
I
I keep things much more simple actually. I just I just use ChronoSync to do some backing up, and then I have RAIDed drives, back in the studio.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing: as long as it's backed up, it's fine. It's fine. No, that's
just
cool.
don't get Tom talking about backup.
No, I'm not going to talk about storage anymore, Greg.
What's your rough setup, Tom?
No, I said don't. I said don't.
Well, I have a RAID 5 array, but I have two RAID 5 arrays in the office. One of which is, the top of the line Synology thing that you were talking about, but it's Thunderbolt. It's Thunderbolt connected, so I'm getting kind of 2.5 gig a second read write to it, which is pretty quick.
Wow.
And then I have a similar thing off site, and then I have now a cloud backup as well. So it's
And with the cloud backup, out of interest, are you sending every file from every job up there?
No. So basically, currently I live in the countryside, so I'm not on ultra fast broadband yet. I'm on super fast. So I am sending the layered TIFFs and the finished TIFFs and the JPEG files. Raw files are just on the physical backups. But hopefully in the next 6 months, I'm getting ultra fast, and then everything will go to the cloud. Video, everything.
Wow. And that'll happen overnight, will it?
Not far off. I figured out. So I've got like a 65 terabyte archive, and I think it'll take about a month and a half, maybe 2 months to upload, which is currently better than the 6.5 years it will currently take me. So it's, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a lot faster. But I'm going to get 900 down, 900 up. Yeah, proper. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Like, properly.
There'll be warm cables running underneath your house.
Yeah, you won't need to put the heating on.
Yeah, I was going to say, something's got to heat it. You seen the cost of living? So
okay, so that's it's good to know about the Asana and things like that. I personally have not heard of that, and we'll put a link in the show notes to it. I mean, you're probably getting the sense anyway from our conversation. I'm very much the dummy in our duo when it comes to the tech side of things.
He's more the artist, and I'm more the nerd.
We've tried to play to each other's strengths and weaknesses, don't we?
How do you keep in touch? How do you keep up to date with jobs and stuff then, Greg? If it's you invoicing for a job that you did a couple of weeks ago and trying to remember whether you picked some color armor up for that job or not, do you keep a?
I try we both use Notion now for kind of our to-do lists, and I have my kind of contact database in there and my equipment database and everything in there. So, and that's been revolutionary because, with the equipment database, for example, I can have a serial number, I can have the receipts, and this is something that Tom kind of drummed into me and walked me through basically. But to have all of that in one place, and a rental cost next to something so that I can actually, tick a box and say, right, we're using that on the shoot, and therefore I can directly show the client what that will cost if they choose to go that route. That's been massively helpful. I think keeping on top of things such as those extra things on shoots, I do find that tricky. I tend to use Google Sheets for my kind of keeping spreadsheets so we're in a place where I can share with my agent. But and software for accounting and what have you. But yeah, it is always difficult because as you'll start to use one system and then somebody will introduce you to something else that's a bit better or a bit different, and then you find yourself spending a long time trying to learn how to use this new bit of software.
But that is why Notion's good. It's because Notion, not to get this kind of like, rerouted slightly, but Notion's great because it's basically a blank bit of software you can build your own databases into. So
I've seen it. I love a rabbit hole. I keep myself on these railroads, but yeah, I went down the whole rabbit hole of moving from Evernote to Notion, and just sort of had a sort of a pleasure pain afternoon of wondering whether I should ship everything out. Because actually, I remember when Evernote came out, it sort of billed as your second brain. You could take a picture with the Evernote app on your phone of a wine bottle, and it would read the word chateau, and then you could search chateau on your iMac, and up would come the picture. Fantastic. I think Evernote now is clunky as hell. It feels like it's really struggling. And actually, I think, I've got it open now. How many thousands I've got something like 2,400 notes in there, and it is like my second brain. And I spent a lot of years just dumping things in there, knowing, presuming that they would all be in there, and of course they haven't necessarily kept up the maybe the iterations and the advancement of the software. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to be the product it was. And I think when you commit to something, so hence me looking at moving over to Notion, because then I'm like, oh God, can I still access everything in Evernote?
Yeah, I guess if you there's always a danger you put all your eggs in one basket and then they get bought by another company and they stop doing any developments or updates, and you just
right. I do kind of feel with Notion we're kind of in that honeymoon period before they kind of do the whole subscription kind of killing model that Evernote bought in, and you go, oh God, really, another one? Great, wicked. But kind of currently, Notion for me is, well, to quickly go back to Greg when we were talking about the equipment list, for example, down at the bottom you can see how many records. So you can basically sum up each kind of column in the database. So you can see, right, okay, I have 300 bits of kit. They're currently worth 78 grand. Right, well, my insurance for the year, I've been over-insuring. So I don't need to do it. So it's ended up saving me probably a couple of £100 a year, because I was over-insuring, because I was just like, I don't know, what, 140? Oh, I don't know. And actually, no, much less.
That's great.
Yeah, it's quite a neat way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, we're big fans of Notion. So, we would wholeheartedly recommend it. And that is a good rabbit hole to go down.
Maybe I could lose another afternoon and export this darn database from Evernote and get it into Notion.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe that's a Christmas holidays job,
Exactly.
Well, whilst we're talking about kind of the way that these things change so rapidly, I mean that brings us on quite nicely to our next question, which is we're nearing the end of our chat. But what I wanted to ask you, kind of what your thoughts were on the kind of future of photography, because obviously we're constantly we spend all this time trying to stay afloat and run our businesses and figure out more efficient ways to run our businesses, and sometimes you just kind of get caught in the moment of dealing with the day-to-day and the kind of firefighting, and also kind of trying to organize diaries and etc. And every now and again I think it's really useful to just take a step back and say, well, actually, where do I see things going in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? And I think at the moment in photography, that's a really interesting question, and kind of slightly terrifying question in some ways, with regards to AI and how things are developing. Well, I guess we just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that, or what your kind of idea of the future of photography was and where you thought it was going.
Yeah, I mean, a really important question that I think we're all constantly mulling over, as well as talking about. And I think, I do a lot of work for magazines, and it's essentially a bit of a race to the bottom. I was paid very handsomely by some magazines when I first arrived in London to do kind of buyout photo shoots where they owned the rights, and they were paying really handsomely. And I was recently commissioned by what I thought was a magazine, but it turned out to be a publishing group, and we were actually doing shots for 3 different publications on the same day, even though it wasn't even a full day shoot. But there was such a rigorous shot list, and these 3 were going to this magazine and these 3 were going to another, and it really made me think, wow, certainly, as well as the titles that have closed, in the last few years that have, that we've kind of all sort of been aware of. So I'm under no illusion that is happening. And I think, I think, the wider question of evolution as well, just with regard to business, imagine if you were, I don't know, you work for a mineral water company, and, all of your mineral water's in plastic bottles, and you're probably having crisis meetings right now thinking, guys, we've got to think of another way to present people with water. It was all fine. The same with film. Imagine being at Kodak and suddenly the the crates and crates of, the pallets of film leaving the factory are dwindling by the moment. And, it's, so I think change is always upon us, isn't it? And I think we need to be at peace with that a bit, really. I think, I think the change with phones is both, nerve-wracking and exciting at the same time. I think, I recently had I shot a book, and I did some portraits of a celebrity for their book, and the art director messaged me and said, have you got some sort of really nice kind of nature kind of shots that we could use as fillers? And I was like, no, I don't have those. And I scrolled further down into the bottom of the email, and she'd actually screen grabbed us and very nicely presented a selection of my Instagram pictures that I'd just taken on various kind of morning strolls, and presented to me this really nice PDF. And I sort of looked at it and thought, oh God, that is actually my work. So I sort of do have some rather nice pictures of some nice countrified scenes, or some leaves in a puddle, whatever it may be. And they were all shot on my iPhone. And in fact, they ended up using some of them, and some of them were big enough to use in the book. So note to self, Daniel, don't go out on your morning stroll without your nice little Ricoh GR2. Don't take your iPhone, but maybe do take your iPhone, because they're kind of okay. And, it's about my eye, isn't it? And what I saw, and how I chose to push the button. So I think, as I'm sure was the same with you guys, not that long ago, we were all super specialists in what we do. And now everyone has a phone in their pocket. I was speaking to a model last week who had posted a picture of herself shot by another photographer, and I recognized the photographer name, and I said, "Oh, that was some nice pictures that you posted." She said, "Oh, well, I went to his home studio, and he just used Facetune to adjust the to adjust the photo, and then just sort of posted it from there." And I was just really shocked, just amazing. Wow. that can kind of happen. And actually, I looked back at the picture, and it was quite a nice black and white shot that didn't look overworked, really. Yeah. But that was just his workflow. He was like, well, it's just being banged up on here, kind of really shocking. So I think we all have to pivot. We need to pivot. We need to be aware of this rolling beast that's moving, and looking at new opportunities, and thinking, I think we were probably, hopefully, all three of us and everyone else listening was born with an eye. We've got this eye to see things, and basically, we can choose these moments to capture hopefully amazing images. So I think we can still stand head and shoulders above, and it just maybe might take a different just a different quarter turn for us to decide how we're going to present that. I've been looking at NFTs, as I'm sure you guys have, and also the way some other photographers have pivoted. I used to share a studio with a brilliant photographer called Tim Brett Day, who had an amazing career as a fashion photographer, really, and he's repurposing a lot of his work as NFTs now, and he's represented himself as an artist. And not only is he having success, but he's really enjoying it as well. And he's going out to gallery openings. He's really immersed in the photography as art scene, and loving it. And he was an artist anyway, but he's now an artist in more of the truer sense of the word. And I'm also struck by Levon Biss's work. I don't know Levon, but I've just seen how he's kind of pivoted to become a very sort of close-up macro photographer, taking these absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful images of insects, which to me are just so fascinating and fantastic. And I see him having shows across the world, and I saw a picture yesterday of one of these images printed, God, it must be 5 feet wide by 5 feet. Fantastic. He's not worried about what's going on with the magazines, and someone's hopefully walking past a beautiful picture of a bug's eye and buying it for a very large amount of money to have on their wall. So I think we need to rethink sometimes about outlets for our work, and always have that at the back of our mind, and thinking about diversifying as well. And I think we would always need to have been doing that, and now so just as much as ever.
And I think actually what you were saying there about the kind of the art director asking about and presenting your pictures back to you, that's a good example of actually in the future where AI would be super useful, because potentially being able to say quick in a quick command and say search my entire archive, find images that match this, this, and this, and this. And I know obviously you can already do that to a certain extent, but it's not particularly user friendly. But you have to remember that every time we're capturing images, we're actually potentially capturing something that could be monetized, and our archive is important. And we've discussed this before on the pod. We've talked to people about NFTs, but also what the future of blockchain tech is going to have in terms of being able to license images.
Right.
Are you going to be able to license images in a fairer way? You're going to be able to license them through micropayments, but in a way that's defined by clicks rather than by, oh, this is for a billboard versus this is for social, in inverted commas. And so I think it's important to kind of keep optimistic about where tech will take things, as well as the kind of, oh god, we're all going to be replaced by computers kind of mentality.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely, absolutely. I think, very well said. Absolutely.
Okay, so we're conscious we've taken up quite a bit of your time, so I just want to ask our final question that we always ask guests, which is our little desert island that we're sending you to. We're keen to know, what would you be taking as your... Let's start with your desert island camera to start with.
Well, I think my desert island camera would be a Nikon FM2, because that was the first camera I got as a staff photographer. Mine actually, I still have it actually, my first one, and it has a dent in it. It's covered in dust, but it's got a dent in it. I can't remember how I dented it, somewhere in Great Yarmouth probably, but it was just built like a brick shithouse, and it was just great, so simple and so reliable, and just really, I think I had a great time using that and getting the feel for film, having the intuition to know to just sort of bounce a bit of light behind me, or maybe this just needed to open up half a stop here, and just that whole, it was like a dark art, right? And I think I had to be very good at it because I was shooting 5 rolls of film a day. So me and my FM2 were, we were like this,
your buddies.
And so I think I'd take the trusty FM2.
So there's something quite nostalgic, isn't there, about a camera that is mechanical and has moving parts? Especially as we get more and more towards just literally a lens and a sensor. There's something about that kind of feeling the clicking under your fingers and feeling things move, and kind of having something that is a tool, and in theory you could take apart and fix yourself. Although I would never want to take apart.
No, definitely, simple.
And so what about your book? What would you be taking as your photo book to this desert island?
Photo book, I think I would take Avedon's In the American West. I just love the simplicity of it. I love the idea of traveling, with a bit of white sheet, and not necessarily the large format element, although I think that would be awesome. But I just love that book. I love Avedon's work. I love the sort of the journey element. I love the not knowing element as well. I did a little trip to Berlin, just where I took a Hasselblad 503cm and some rolls of film, and just stuck a bit of background paper up on a wall and stopped some people that went past. And it was a real mix of feelings doing that. Sometimes it felt awkward to stop the people. Sometimes they looked at me a little bit strangely. Not many said no. I chose who I wanted to stop for visual reasons. And then I shot a whole raft of different people. And even though it wasn't all wonderful and enjoyable, it was slightly nervy, I was pleased with the results. And I posted a screen grab of Photo Mechanic showing 3x4 rows on my Instagram. And in fact, that was one of the first jobs I did for the Sunday Times, because the Sunday Times photo director had seen that and thought, wow, that's quite interesting. So that was an example of sort of getting off your arse and doing something self-generated. But I think maybe that was inspired by Avedon and the American West. I also really love the work of Platon as well, who I'm sure you both know, but just shooting with one shoot through brolly above the lens and just removing the lighting element. Often I've got 4 or 5 or 7 lights on the go, and we've got a lot of moving parts, metaphorically and physically. And how nice in some ways to let's just use a simple shoot through. Let's remove lighting totally, and let's just make something happen between me and the subject. And I imagine Avedon was very much like that as well when he brought in 2 old farmers in front of the sheet or whatever. So so that would be the work that I would sort of sit on my hammock and look through, I think, rum cocktail in hand,
Sounds ideal. Excellent.
Delightful.
Well, if people want to find out more, Dan, where's good for them to go? I know that you do a bit of mentoring and you've got a kind of online presence. So where would you want people to head?
Yeah, sure. You can follow me on Instagram, Dan Kennedy Photo, I think. My website's danielkennedy.com. And I've worked with a few photographers who are really keen on sort of accelerating their journey on the mentoring scheme, which is you can find out more about that at dankennedyacademy.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
We're a pleasure, guys. Lovely to talk to you.
No, likewise. Thank you very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode. If you'd like to read more about the episode or see the show notes, you can go over to the website, which is exposenegative.com. And to get in touch with us, there's a myriad of options. So you can either email us at info@exposenegative. You can follow us on Instagram @xnegative. We're on Twitter as well. But also, if you'd like to follow us personally, I mean, why wouldn't you? We're at tombarnes.com. That's DOTCOM. And we're at Greg Fennell, which is GREG, obviously, FUNNELL. And we'll look forward to, we won't see you on the next one, but hopefully you enjoy listening to it.